Hello and welcome to the Eldorado for bedroom guitarists, music producers, arrangers, singers and songwriters. Short, BGM BAS. This is my attempt to create a base of valuable information which are needed for exactly us, people who are not, or maybe not yet pros, but really into making music at home. The first thing I would like to talk about is something I've been struggling with for a longer time now. And I'm really kind of ashamed that I did figure it out so late. Since I couldn't find any good tutorial covering this topic, I decided finally to do it by myself. So here it is, the relation between major and minor pentatonic scale. To conquer the relation, we will need to take a look at both, the theory and the practice. The first part is about the theory. The second one will give us some examples and practical usage hints. To guarantee a deep understanding, we should start with a cycle of fifths. The cycle gives us a visualization of the relation between chords and musical scales, regarding the amount of common notes. Each step in this cycle represents a sign change, which means there is one tone different between the steps. Because scales with common notes are also more harmonic to each other, most popular songs use chord progressions which are very close to each other within this cycle. If you want to find out more about it, watch the YouTube video Axis of Awesome. This video highlights a few songs which uses the same chord progression, which would be here for example C, G, A minor and F, or G, D, E minor and C, or even E, A, B, like in blues for example. Really, the most of the music you hear on the radio will follow this rule. But the most important information we need to understand now is the relation between the minor and the major scales. You can see that every major scale has its minor equivalent, which is represented here as the outer and the inner scale on each step of a cycle. Here we can see that the major C has a minor A as its equivalent, since they both has no sign and two share the same notes, which are the white keys on the piano, by the way. This also applies to G and E minor, and also to D and B minor, but also A and F sharp minor, and so on and so forth. Now let's have a quick look how these notes lays out on a keyboard. The tones of C major scale are as promised filling the white keys of the piano keyboard. The same applies also to the A minor scale. The only difference is that we have a different starting position, which is the root A. So when we play the same notes from C to B, we got a C major scale. And when we play from A to G, we got the alphabet. That obviously proves that A minor scale is considered kind of the most common scale. That's probably because A is a concert pitch and its scale got no signs. But it also proves, to be honest, that the letter H used in Europe instead of a B is a big misunderstanding, caused probably by a transcription error. However, let's now have a look at the difference between the standard scales and the pentatonic. The difference is fairly simple. We just remove two notes. If you really want to know why, I found two explanations on that. Since they are a bit longer, you can also skip the next 3 minutes if you are not interested in this explanation. The first one is a top-down explanation approach. This is taken from Bruno Pelletier-Bacquert's website, and I hope I pronounced it correctly, and you can find a link below in the description. So, take a C note and build a series of perfect fifths. From C go to G, from G to D, from D to A, and from A to E. The 5 notes we end up with are C, G, D, A, E. If we rearrange those 5 notes within an octave, we got the C major pentatonic scale. If we keep the same sequence but start from A, we got the A minor pentatonic scale. He also points out that the minor pentatonic configuration may even seem more balanced because of its perfect mirrored layout. When we look at the A minor pentatonic scale again, which is A, C, D, A, G, the first 2 notes are a minor third apart, and so are the last 2 notes. The second and the third note are a whole tone apart, and so are the third and the fourth notes. And finally the first, middle and the last note are all a perfect fourth apart. Now let's consider the second a bottom-up explanation approach. As you can see, there are some missing black keys on the piano. That means that there is no half step between the notes. All keys which has a black key in between are actually whole steps, and those without are half steps. Now a half step is the most smallest tonal step on a well-tuned piano. Keeping that in mind, we also should be aware of the fact that during improvisation we really have to avoid those spicy notes, or at least use those on purpose. Those notes tend to be sticking out of an otherwise smoothly aligned tone pattern. Now, what are those tones? In the case of a concert pitch A, the frequency is 440 Hz. Any sound wave cycling with the same frequency would also align with the root perfectly, because it's the same tone, and they can be evenly divided by each other. Now, if you multiply the 440 with 2 or divide it by 2, you will get the higher or lower octave, which will also align with the root very well, because they can also be evenly divided by each other. The next step would be the perfect fifth, which is the product of order divisor by 1.5. The result lies exactly between the root and its octave in both directions. Following the same logic, next one good alignment would be the third. But then the intervals get more and more dissonant, ending in the most not aligning interval, which is the half tone. So these dissonant tones are also not aligning well with their scale neighbors, right? And tend to sound very spicy. So to ensure that your improvisation runs smoothly, it's probably a good idea to leave those tones out, which are not a root, not a fifth, not a third, and does not align with their neighbors smoothly. And those tones are exactly the F and the B. Once we removed those 2 notes out of 7, we are left with 5 notes. And this is exactly what a pentatonic is. Now let's see how this can be applied to a fretboard. These are the same notes we have been discussing before, beginning with our A, which is also the root in the A minor pentatonic. So we can tell that there are 2 full pentatonic scales in this pattern and 1 additional tone from the scale. The next one is our C. Then we got our D and then our E. And the last one of this octave is G. Then the scale repeats 1 octave higher. This is of course not the only position we can play our pentatonic scale. Now when you look at the letters beneath the fretboard, you can see our alphabet going from 5th to 10th fret and then 0th fret to 3rd fret. The last ones could also be played further on the neck, starting at the 12th up to the 15th fret. But it's easier to picture it like that right now. When we now remove the not pentatonic tones, we are left with exactly so many positions to start a new pattern as tones are in the pentatonic scales. Now since each tone can be considered a new starting point, we can distinguish 5 positions. Position 1 is starting on the A. Position 2 is starting on the C. Position 3 starts on the D. And position 4 starts on the E. And here is where we can either move our hands to the beginning of the neck and play some open strings, or start at the 12th fret. Finally, we got our 5th position starting on the G. It's very good to know all those patterns for all positions to prevent your hand from drastic movement across the fretboard when you want to emphasize some lick, for example, but especially the 1st and the 2nd are basic knowledge. And that's because the 1st position is also sometimes referred as the home row of a minor pentatonic. But since minor and major share the same notes, what we've proven previously, it can also be used for playing around major chords. But since the next position starts with a C and C is our major equivalent, this one can be considered the home row of a major pentatonic. Now as far as the theory goes, we can prove that the notes are not the same when you use position 1 and position 2 starting in the same note. But in fact, within the practical part, I will show you that in sound situations both scales can be used at the same time and also mixed together. The difference is actually quite drastic. When we mark the major pentatonic tones with yellow beside the root and the minor with blue, and when we mix them together, we can see that the only note beside the root which stays the same is the 4th pentatonic tone, which is at least a perfect 5th. So how comes that both positions can be mixed together and played exclusively or side by side in some situation? Well, this mystery needs to be solved in a more practical part 2 of this video.